All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining us on this Lunch and Learn webinar. It's titled Lunch and Learn Relax Webinar, Advanced Microsoft Excel. We've got the phone set to mute for all the attendees, and I definitely want you guys to do this today, now or during or near the end of the webinar. If you guys, in your GoToWebinar control panel, there's a little tab where you can ask questions. It's actually the same spot you were just typing in the comments. We'd love for you to do that. I'll be fielding the questions as we're going through. May interrupt Ari with some of them as we're going, or for sure we'll cover them at the end of the webinar. Now we're going to start with a quick poll here. It's a similar poll as the last Excel webinar we did, but here's what I was thinking. After you guys have viewed and participated in the last Excel webinar, some people that wrote in, Excel being frustrating or it's complicated and hard to use, may have changed that tune, right? Because it's got more clarity and it's easier for you now. So if you guys can answer this, what phrase best describes Excel for you? My best friend, I use it every day. It saves me time. I know I'd love it if I knew how to use it better. Or frustrating, it's complicated and hard to use. Give you guys 10, 15 more seconds to toss that in there.
It's a battle for my best friend, and I know I'd love it.
So far. See, last time we had some frustrating, complicated. I think you're solely responsible for that, Ari, for moving people from frustrating, or they were so frustrated by watching the first webinar that they just gave up and they didn't want to watch the advanced version. One of the two.
There could be that. It could be that.
Yeah. All right. So let me close this poll down, and there's the results.
With 3/4 voting, we got half that it's their best friend. They use it every day. 9% saving them time. 41% know they'd have a love affair going if only they could get to know it better. Let's see if I can help move the needle on the 41%. I'm gonna go forward, Kyle, with the assumption, even if it's only just to maintain my own personal sanity, that the 0% for frustrating, even though we had some frustrated users last time, is that we were able to move the needle from frustrated to at least they know they'd love it if they knew how to use it better.
There you go.
And hopefully into the save some time. So let's see if we can't kind of move a little bit forward with that. I am glad to see that there's no one saying it's frustrating and complicated, because today is going to be more focused on some advanced features. One of the comments that we've received back from everyone in regards to the webinars was that kind of in our first attempts, both at the end of 2011 and into 2012, was that we tried to cover a little bit too much in every one stop. So we tried to kind of dial it back to some basics in our last 2 Excel webinars that people had asked about, and now we're going to try and dial it up a little bit into some more advanced topics. And so we're going to be looking at count ifs and average ifs and VLOOKUPs, nested VLOOKUPs, multi VLOOKUPs. I'm going to touch on some conditional formatting as well. So we'll look into all those things, and I'm going to try and do this. I actually created a little sample Excel, as I often do. So what I'm going to try and do is go through. I've got 2 different sample Excel spreadsheets. I'm going to try and go through each one, explaining what the purpose of creating it was, and then go into how it sort of works, and then reverse engineer it to try and show how it was created, to hopefully give you guys some ideas of how you might be able to use this in your own kind of daily lives or line of business. I have 2 examples.
But Ari, we have probably 20, 30, 40 different vertical markets on the line. Can't you just show an example for each of them?
Well, no, I can't, is the short
Okay.
answer on that.
All right.
Primarily because we don't have the time, but also because it's funny living in my own world as I do, and Kyle living in his world. When we tried to come up with different examples for all the different industries that were represented on this webinar, it was hard for us to come up with that, quite frankly.
It's always fun.
Yeah, it is fun. So we actually reached out to some participants, some people that have participated in multiple webinars, and asked them if there was kind of some examples they could think of. And so as a result, the 2 examples we came up with was this sort of task list calculator that I'm going to show here as a template. And then we also decided to show you what we use in Excel to calculate our survey results. Many of you, if you're a primary contact with IT Direct, you receive 3 times a year a survey that sort of looks at gauging how we're doing. And so I actually have the example from July. There's actually one coming out later this month. So I'm going to use this opportunity to remind any of you that are on the call who get the survey to please respond to it. We do review it. We do act on it. And it's our ability to find out how we can serve you better. So if you could take a moment to respond to that when it comes in, I would appreciate it. All right, enough plugging of that. So I will show kind of how we use Excel to calculate those survey results. And I think between the two of those, it's going to show some advanced functions and hopefully generate some ideas of how you might be able to use Excel to the benefit in your organization. If after this webinar, or even during, I suppose, if you have any thoughts of, hey, I think we could use something like this, but I'd want to tweak it a little bit, if you want to kind of put that in a note to Kyle through the chat window now, or you want to email it in after the fact, as we've done in the past, we'd be very happy to follow up with you offline and figure out if there's a way we can help. So without further ado, let me get into the spreadsheet. So I created a spreadsheet. I essentially said the sort of concept behind this spreadsheet is, what if I wanted to be able to price out, put an estimate together of how something would take, how long it would take me to service a client in the legal realm. And that's just sort of what I invented here, was a spreadsheet that would give you an opportunity to put a task list together by issue and matter, so issue or matter. So I've created sort of subheadings here of issue and matter, and then you'd be able to put in whatever the task was. So, I don't know, meet with client, research, issue, to pose witnesses, whatever the items might be in this task list, right? And so this could be a task list for any organization. I happen to go with attorneys. And then what I sort of set up here was a sheet that allows the person creating the form to look up to create a form that generates the appropriate rates without them having to look up rates or know what the different rates are, and then determine if it was work that needed to be done after hours or on a holiday, or what size of client it was. In this scenario, we've assumed that a larger client, right, one that might have a bigger retainer or have a bigger commitment with the firm, would get a lower hourly rate commensurate with that. So again, just totally made up, but that's what I put together here. So let me show a couple interesting things. So up here you'll notice, well, let me first say that one of the things that I've learned in Excel and that I use is I use this sort of light green color that you could see on the sheet here. I'm going to zoom in a little bit. But I use this light green color to represent a field that I know I need to look at and possibly change, and that if I change that field, it will have a ripple effect in my spreadsheet. So I think it's important to take a moment to acknowledge that, because it's really important as we get into more advanced spreadsheets that we know what cells are going to impact other cells, because that can have a major impact on the results. So if I'm in this example, I might be relying on this to generate a quote to give to a potential client. Well, it's going to be important to me that that quote's right, because the implications of one of my formulas being wrong and then giving a bad quote, either too high or too low, could have potentially disastrous ramifications. So I think it's important to have obvious cues, not subtle cues, but obvious cues that trigger me to say, okay, I need to pay a special attention to this. I need to go back and review this to make sure that I've entered this correctly. So that's what I've done here. So let me show you how that works. So up here under client size, you'll see it says hourly. And when I click on it, you can maybe see this little drop-down arrow to the right, okay? When I click, left click with my mouse, when I left click on that drop-down, I now see 5 different options here, right? Hourly, small, medium, large, and extra large. Again, I just made this up. But these are different categories of the size of a potential client. So it says hourly right now. Well, let's go to medium. So now that I've said medium, if you could see that or were paying attention, you'll notice that all of the rates in this column here just changed to reflect the rate for a medium client, right? So keep an eye on this 185 right here. When I go back up here to medium, you're watching that 185. When I go to extra large, See that 185 turned to 150, and then all of these numbers below also changed, and I'll get into that momentarily. So this is a really easy drop down, right? That's going to allow me to adjust my rates based on the client size. So I'm going to say that that's kind of the overall modifier. So I've got that up there. And again, for any of us out here that have worked, or in my case are to some degree, working in business development or new clients, having a way to do this without having to look up all the different rates and modify it in all the different areas can be hugely important, not just for saving time, although that's part of it, but also for accuracy. As I alluded to earlier, this type of formulas, when you're getting into these type of things that you're making business decisions on, right, this is important to be accurate, okay? And I'll show you, by the way, how we got that drop down. So, all right, so that's one thing. And I've got some other drop downs in here. So for instance, the level of the attorney, right? So this is a junior associate. If I click on this drop down, you'll notice I've got junior associate, associate, junior partner, and partner. And when I change that, that also changes the rate. So you see I've got associate here, that says 220 based on that it's a small client at an associate level. But if I change this to media, or to large rather, see that dropped to 192.50 in this particular example. And if I move to a junior partner, right, so it's doing a double variable lookup, right? So it knows the size of the client and the level of the attorney is going to modify my rate. Okay, so that's a double level. And the way I've actually got it right now is I've actually got this timing column also in there, right? So that it knows it's normal business hours. So it's at that hourly rate. Now I don't have a drop down in here, and the reason I don't have a drop down is because I wanted to show you how I created it. But I do know that this
Now, Ari, was it really because you wanted to show us how to create it, or did you forget?
Did not forget. Totally actually set it up. Like
Let a boy.
So what I'm going to show is that all the drop down's doing is selecting words, right? So I happen to know that one of the other options in this is holiday, right? So if I type in holiday here, it made the change. And I'm only showing this to indicate the three-way variable, right? So it's looking up the large size, the level, and the timing, right? So if I go back to normal, it's going to bring it back to normal hourly rate. Okay. So how did I get this all set up? How did I make this all work? There's one other thing I wanted to show, which in this case I did add the freeze panes. So as I scroll down, you'll notice that task list, hours, level, and all these items on top stay, but the bottom ones scroll. So that's something that we've covered in other Excel webinars, but I will just touch on it one more time, and then I'm going to go into how I did these drop downs and the calculations. Okay, so the freeze panes, right, which keeps my top row frozen, right, is all done in the view, in the view ribbon. So if I click on view under this freeze panes drop down, if I click unfreeze panes, right, because they were already frozen, you'll notice as I scroll down, everything disappears, okay? But if I want everything above a certain line to stay, I highlight the line below. I want it to be frozen, right, the line below. So I want everything on row 3 and up. So I'm going to highlight row 4. I'm on the view tab. I go to freeze panes, and now I'm frozen, right? So it keeps my task list. That way, as I add stuff down below, it's going to continue to show me those top level lines. Okay, so I did that. So let me kind of show a little bit. And what you'll notice is what we're going to show right now. I'm going to show how I created those drop downs, and I'm also going to show in some detail these VLOOKUP formulas, because that's what we're looking at here. And if you can sort of see in the formula bar, it's a pretty complicated looking formula, but I basically have a multivariable VLOOKUP looking up another single variable VLOOKUP and doing a multiplication against the two. And at the end of the day, all this boils down to is multiplying two numbers. It's just the matter of the formula being able to give me these drop downs, give me the selections, and then having those selections turn into numbers to give me the rate, right? So, all right, so here we go. So what I did to get this thing going was I created initially a second tab, which in this case I've named rates. And what I did was I put into this tab all of the rate structure information that I wanted. So let me start up here at the top. I'm going to zoom in. So I created this rate. And this is what I would consider to be sort of a typical rate table, right? So I've got my headings across the top. So the client type, this is the level or the role of the person, right? So junior associate, associate, junior partner, partner. Okay. And then now in the table, right, going down the rows, I've got my hourly, small, medium, large, and extra large, and then across showing me the relative. So, and then so that's sort of my basic rate setup, okay? And the way I've done this is I've actually set this up so in the future, if I ever wanted to modify, and by the way, this should be highlighted in that green color, so I'm going to do that right now.
Time out. Show that. I know that's more of a basic thing, but show how you did that real quick.
Oh, sure. I'm going to Control Z to undo that. So all I did was I highlighted, I right-clicked. This is like the little fill color deal that you've probably been familiar with using it up in the ribbon. I'm just using the right-click menu. I hit a drop-down, and then the color green that I use is a custom color, which is in my recent colors list. It's called this light green, so I just selected that, and they all turn green.
Thank you.
Fair enough? Okay. So because if I change these, it actually will change the numbers down below, and that's just how I set it up to make my life easier in the future. So I had that set up, okay? Because I'm using this hourly, small, medium, large, extra large. That's the drop down on the other sheet, right? So I'm just going to change this from hourly. I'm just going to change it to the word something. If I go back to my tasks and I go to my drop down, you'll notice that this now says something instead of hourly. All right, I'm just going to do that one more time. So if I go to rates, this said something. I'm just going to put the word else. All right, if I go back to my task and I go to my drop down, else is now the top option. So all this drop down is doing is referencing these 5 cells. That's all it's doing. Okay? So let me change this back to hourly. So how did I get it to do that, right? So all you had to do to make that happen is if I go down to data, excuse me, if I go to data, and you see this data validation here, right? So if I click on this data validation, you'll notice that it's set up to do a list, and the source, right, is those 5 cells, right? It's on the rates sheet, A4 to A9, all right? So let me kind of show how I did that, because I can put that drop down anywhere. So if I go over here, and I click on data validation, this is what the default data validation window looks like, okay? And it says, right now it's set to allow any value, right? That's the default. Any cell can allow any value. But I'm going to say, no, I want it to be a list, and I'm going to generate the source of this list. So I'm going to click on this, which allows me to select the cells. I go to the rates table, highlight the cells that I wanted, and then click OK, and boom, there's my drop-down. Make sense? Kyle, do you think that made sense?
Yes, sir.
Get some feedback? All right, if anyone has a question right now or wants to throw something into the chat box and it's relevant, Kyle, you let me know, okay?
Sounds good.
All right, so I'm going to undo that just using the Control-Z. So that's how I'm able to generate this drop-down, okay? And all I'm using that for is as part of the lookup, okay? So let me talk about how I got this actual rate, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to copy this formula. I'm going to open up a notepad real quick here. Actually, you know what? Better yet, I'm going to put it in Word so I can zoom into it, because I think it'd be helpful for you guys to be able to see what the formula details are. All right. Hopefully it's big enough on the screen. So the formula, let's just deal with it in pieces, okay? So what I'm looking at here, let me just try to translate this real quickly. So what I did was I'm looking at this rate box, the table, the cell that the rate is in, and I've copied the formula out into Word just so we can really dig in and see what I'm looking at here, okay? And the formula, as I mentioned earlier, has 2 parts, okay? It's basically taking 2 lookups and multiplying them by each other. So the first lookup is what I would call a dual variable lookup. And what you're going to see here is $D2 and D5 is what it's looking up, okay? So let's see what's in those cells. So D2, right? So this is, if I go behind over here, this is cell, right? I'm in column D, row 2, D2. It's looking at this large, and that's locked in, right? So you'll notice in here I've got the 2 dollar signs around it. Dollar sign before it, right? Dollar sign before D, dollar sign before 2. That locked it in. And the reason I locked it in is so that when I copied the formula down, I always kept that cell, because I always wanted that cell to be part of the lookup. but you'll notice D5 has no dollar signs, right? D5 is not locked in. And the reason is because D5 is this junior partner cell, right? And as I copy this rate down, I always want to be looking at the relative level on the row that I'm on, right? So the reason I locked in the client size is because the client size applies to this whole sheet, right? I'm doing one sheet for this client. The client's all large, but the tasks change. So this is a partner level task, or let's just say it's a junior associate, right? I can move it around however you want. And the first part of this formula is saying, okay, tell me what the rate is if I'm a large client and junior associate. And that's all this is. If I translate that, that's just telling me I want to do VLOOKUP. Let's just say the V for variable, right? So I just want to do a variable lookup. I want to do a lookup on the size client, right? That's D2, and then by the rate, which in this case was D5, the level of the rate. And then what do I want to look up to? So I want to look up rates exclamation point, right? That's telling me the name of the sheet that I want to look it up on is rates, okay? And I'm hoping that everyone's following on this more advanced stuff, but if you're only doing formulas on one sheet, so in other words, this sheet that I'm on right here is named task, right? Tasks, plural, I should say. And people are probably familiar with the default, sheet 1, sheet 2. I just created sheet 1 to show you. I tend to rename mine so that they make more sense. So this is called tasks, and you'll notice in the formula for the first cells that are on this sheet, it doesn't say tasks because it won't put it in there if it's on the same sheet. So if anyone out there only ever does formulas on the same sheet, then you're only going to be seeing the cells. But when you go to multiple sheets, you're going to start to see this exclamation point that tells you the name of the sheet that you're working on. So I want to look up those two variables on the rates sheet through cells A10 to D31, the fourth column, and false in this case, by the way, means it has to be true. So when you're using a VLOOKUP command, false has to be true. And I'm going to get to how I created this whole thing in 1 second. So if I go over to my rates, how did I get that lookup? What I had to do was I had to create in this table the joint variables. So let me zoom in so you can see what I did. I created hourly junior assoc, right? I combined the client type and the level into one cell, right? And that's what the lookup is looking for. And if you'll notice up here, all I'm doing is this is joining these two cells, right? So the key is the client type, and so that's a formula right there. If you ever put a cell and a cell in the formula, it just joins those two, what's in those two cells, it just joins the text fields together.
I never knew that. Is that just for text fields?
Yeah, I don't think you can do it with numbers, but I'm actually not 100% sure on that. I only ever use it for text, right? So all I did to create this key was I have my client types down in this row here, and the role is here, right? So the way I put it together was I have hourly, small, medium, large, extra large, which are the 5 different client types. And then here's the role, junior associate, and the potential rate at that level. Does that make sense? Can I get some feedback from you, Kyle? Are you following me with that?
Yep, that makes sense. Yep.
So then all I'm doing here is joining these together, right? So I'm saying equals that, and it's giving me hourly junior associate, right? So what I'm doing on the lookup is I'm actually just looking up that same thing, right? So I want you to tell me what the rate is if I'm large and a junior partner, and this is telling me that it's 228. And how it found that was it went over here, it looked for large, junior partner, and it gave me the response in the fourth column, right? So this is the first column, second column, third column, fourth column is 228, right? So I'm actually going to recreate that formula really quickly so you can see what I'm talking about. So if I go down here and I say equals VLOOKUP, right? Open parentheses. So the first thing it's telling me, right?
Can you just read the definition they give on that? It popped up a second ago. There you go.
It just says looks for a value in the leftmost column of a table, and then returns a value in the same row from a column you specify. And then by default, the table must be sorted in ascending order.
And if you were to dumb that down a little bit for us, how would you describe what a VLOOKUP is?
it's going to help me take a variable and then return a result in a defined table.
Thank you.
So what I'm going to do is VLOOKUP. I open my parentheses. It's already starting to give me what I need, right? So the first thing it wants to know is, what is my lookup value? So what I said was I wanted to take this large. So you'll notice right now it says VLOOKUP is D2. So I'm going to hit F4. F4 adds those dollar signs in, which locks that cell. And that's a really, for anyone that doesn't know that, that's a great feature that can be used all the time, right? So if I want to be able to copy a formula but lock in a cell, so because normally when I copy a formula, if I copy it from one cell 3 to the right, it moves all of the formula stuff 3 to the right. But I want to lock in that cell, so I hit F4. So I want to say I want to look up that, put an and, right? Because I'm still using that same formula where I'm just adding two pieces of text together. So D2 and D5, that's my value. It's going to return what I want to look up. So I hit comma. Now it wants to know what is the table that I'm looking up. So I go back to my rates sheet, and I want to highlight this whole table. I don't need the header, right? Just the data. So I'm going to go down in here, highlight my whole table, right? Comma. What column do I want to look up, right? What column index number? What do I want to return my value from? So my table has 4 columns. The number that I want is all the way to the right in the 4th column. So that's going to be 4, right? Hit a comma again. And now it wants to know true or false. Now this is the part of the VLOOKUP in my mind that's the most confusing. In this particular case, true means an approximate match, so it doesn't have to be exact. False is you only want to look up on an exact match. So I pretty much always use false. For me, it's kind of confusing because you'd think most often in Excel, if you want it to be exact, it's true, and if you want it to be anything else, it's false. But in any case, in this particular case, false is an exact match, and Excel prompts you. So you can just either type in false or select it. So I'll just type in false. Helps if I spell it correctly.
I'm going to take that up with Microsoft and see if we can get that fixed for you, Ari.
Yeah, you hook that up. So, and there you go. I hit enter, and it returned 228. All right. So I'm hoping people are following that. The one thing I didn't do that I probably would if I was copying it is I want to lock in my columns. I want to lock in those. When I went to the rates, right? When I went to look it up on that other sheet, I'm going to go back here and I hit F4 on this one and F4 on this one to lock it in, because as I copy it down, I want it to look up the rates. And do you see how it's still finding all the same information up here? Because I've got it locked in and I'm just copying down, 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 right? So it's automatically, see if I hit F, I don't know if people know this, here's another little trick. If I'm on a cell and I hit F2, F2 shows me the formula. And if you look up here, do you notice any of the cells being used in the formula are highlighted? And they're highlighted in the same color that they appear in the formula.
And that's F2?
So you'll notice, yeah, I hit F2. So I'm on a cell, I hit F2 on my keyboard, and my formula is now showing, right? And you'll notice how it says equals VLOOKUP D2, right? With $sign because it's locked in. But see, D2 might be hard to see over the webinar, but it's in like that light purple color. And if I come up to cell D2, that's got a box around it that's in that same purple color. And D6 is in that sort of light red. And D6 up here, the actual cell itself is boxed, bracketed in that light red. So anyway, I just think that that's kind of an interesting way. If you hit F2, you can sort of, it helps you to find out what cells are being highlighted. So anyway, I'm just showing that how I created that formula. So you can see that I've now used the VLOOKUP to return a number based on 2 text drop-down boxes that I put together, okay? So you remember before I had this timing. So how does that come into play? Well, the timing is that I know that during normal business hours, it's one rate. Maybe on after hours, right, on nights or weekends, maybe it's a higher rate. And then on the holidays, it's even a higher rate, okay? So let's just say that that's true in this case. So on my rates tab, you'll notice over here I have another table I created. Very basic table, right? It's just got 2 columns, timing and multiple. So it says normal, after hours, and holiday, 1, 1.5, and 2, okay? So let me go back to my formula. So remember, this is the formula that I'm using. We just covered this first half, right? This VLOOKUP variable. And there's another part of the formula, right? So So what this formula says is, okay, look up, sorry, I know I'm bouncing around, I'm trying to do that less here. Okay, so what this formula is saying, okay, look up what the rate is. That's this first piece right here. This first formula, all it's doing is returning a rate based on the level of the work being done and the type of the client. It's giving me a number. And then I'm saying times, right, that's this little asterisk, multiply that by, and then look up to tell me what the multiplier is, right? So you'll notice, going back to this, that if it's normal, right, normal business hours, it's a multiple of 1, meaning no change, right? So if I take any number times 1, I end up with the same number. My after hours rate in this example is 1.5 times, right? So 150% of normal. So it's going to multiply by 1.5, and on the holidays it's going to multiply by 2, right? So it's a pretty basic formula. All you're doing is multiplying by 1, 1.5, or 2. But I'm taking all the guesswork out of it by just asking the person creating this, right, to just tell me, is it normal, after hours, or holiday? And I'm going to use this opportunity to once again show how I created that drop-down lookup. So the normal here is just typed in, but I can have it be a lookup, right? So let me kind of clear out these cells. So I'm going to clear them out. And you'll notice now that I deleted them, all these rates turn to not applicable because it doesn't know what to multiply it against because there's nothing in the timing, right? So if I put in, I wanted to do a drop down. So again, I'm on the data ribbon. Oops, didn't mean to lock that down. I'm on the data ribbon, and I'm going to click on data validation, okay, the top piece, data validation. And it's saying, what do you want to do? So right now it's allowing any value. I'm saying, nope, I want a list. And here's the source of my list. I'm going to click on this. Now it's saying, prompting me to select the cells. So I'm going to go back to my rates tab. I'm going to highlight these 3. I'm going to click this again, say OK. And now I've got my drop down. Now, the drop down can be copied, right? It can be copied just like any other cell. So watch this. I'm going to copy it all along where I need it in my table, and boom, I'm done. And now these are all drop downs based on those same 3 cells.
And Ari, can you pause just for one moment? I noticed usually when I would do that, I would copy it and I'd paste it in each cell. It looked like you copied it and then you kind of drug it down, and it took care of all 3 at once. How did you do that?
Yeah, so let me undo it. So I'm going to use Control-Z again and undo all this copying. So here's the thing, right? So I don't want it all the way down. I only want it in certain cells. So if I copy 1, right? So I use Control-C to copy. That's just how I do it. So
Yep.
I then highlight it everywhere I wanted it, and I hit Enter, and it will go everywhere. If I highlight 3 of them and did copy, right, it would give me 3, but I don't have like the same number down here. So it was just easier for me in my mind to copy 1 of them, highlight everywhere I wanted it, hit Enter, and then it's in.
Interesting. Cool.
Okay.
Thanks.
So those drop downs are now allowing me. Now watch, if I do after hours, so let's just take a look at this, right? $175 an hour is what this is saying. If I drop it down to after hours, it's $260.50, which anyone who has a quick calculator on them, if you took the 175, multiplied it by 1.5, you'd end up with $262.50, right? And just the same way that if I choose this holiday, I'm going to end up with $350, right? So I'm doing basic math, right? That's just kind of one of the things maybe I'm harping on it too much, but for me, the revelation here is all I'm doing is, in using these lookups, is I'm taking basic, anyone can understand normal, after hours, and holiday. They don't need to know what the multiplier is. They don't need to remember what the junior associate hourly rate is on a large client for normal time, right? They don't need to remember that. It's just done there, and that can be particularly helpful when you're in an organization where you have anything that you want to do where the rates might change, or on either an annual basis or maybe on a project basis, right? So I know, for instance, one of our clients does tours, and I could certainly imagine where you might have different potential rates depending on where their pickup is, if they have to take a bus or go into a certain thing, and maybe you want to just create a template where anyone can look up what the certain variables are, and it returns a rate without them having to remember the rates, right? So if you can sort of template this, and I can always just go back here later and change the multipliers or change these hourly rates, but my task list remains the same, right? So I'm all about trying to create sort of that one-to-many scenario, right? I can make one thing fit multiple objectives, and and makes it easier for the people operating it, right? One person makes the changes and everyone else just goes through their normal tasks with everything kind of happening in the background. So that's a little bit how that works. I think I've got that. The other benefit, by the way, to drop downs I wanted to talk about was you'll notice before that on this normal after hours or holiday that even if I don't have the drop down, right, it still works if I type in the right letter, right? So right, I just copied away from a drop down. So if I type in holiday, it's going to work, right? But I'm relying now on accurate spelling, which, as we all know, in typing, you know, is a crapshoot, especially when you're in a hurry. So, like for instance, how did I write after hours? Was it after space hours? No, that doesn't work. Was it after no space hours? No, maybe it was abbreviated. Right? It's hard to remember what it is, right? With the drop down, I eliminate any guesswork because the spellings are always going to be right because all they can do is select from what I already have, right? So, and I just copied it back over and I've got it. So, I mean, I think the drop down can be a very helpful way to make sure that the data is what you want it to be, right? And that there's no misspellings. All right. So, oh wow, this hour is flying by. Okay. I hope this is being helpful. Let me kind of get into the last piece on this, and I'm just going to move to the survey results.
Sounds great.
I have time, Kyle, to be honest. But
no, sounds great.
Okay. So if I go to this, the last thing I wanted to show is, what if I want to make sure no one accidentally goes into this rate sheet, right? Because this rate sheet is now the key to everything, right? If someone goes in here and makes a change, it's going to be hugely problematic, especially if someone makes a change to the root template, and then boom, I've got problems everywhere, okay? So let me show you how I can avoid that. There's two things I'm going to do. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to lock the sheet so that people can't make changes to the sheet, right? And then I'm going to save it as an Excel template so that the chances of somebody overwriting it go down dramatically. Okay, so how do I do that? First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the Review tab, right, my Review ribbon rather, up here at the top. And you'll notice there's two options here, Protect Sheet and Protect Workbook. Now, I'm going to do Protect Sheet because I need to be able to have people edit the first sheet, right? And just to make sure, we covered this in previous Excel webinars, but this is where, again, once you get into advanced stuff, understanding Excel lingo is crucial. Excel considers, I know we all reference sort of them as spreadsheets, right? Hey, did you open that spreadsheet? Did you save that spreadsheet? But in Excel world, the file that you save is actually a workbook, and all these different tabs are the worksheets, right? So when it's protect a sheet, it's protecting one of these various tabs you could have in here. Protect a workbook is going to lock the whole file. So I'm going to go to this sheet. I'm going to hit Protect Sheet, and I'm going to have this Protect Worksheet Contents, right? So I'm just going to go in here and type a password, right? So it would help if I typed the password the same both times, wouldn't it? Okay. So now my sheet is protected, right? So you cannot make changes. If I try and type something that says the cell or chart you're trying to change is on a protected sheet, even I can't do anything without unlocking it. Okay, big time word to the wise here. Don't lose that password. That's not like one of your Windows login passwords where you just like call up IT Direct and we unlock the Excel sheet for you. Let's just say, for all practical intents and purposes, this password is ungettable. So if you lose this password, this sheet will be uneditable for all eternity, basically. All right? So, and as soon as you hit save, it's in there. So I don't generally recommend this, but I do for Excel, which is try and pick one password that you use to lock all your Excel sheets and stick to that password, because what you don't want to have happen is you lock a sheet and then a year and a half later, and this definitely has happened to me, where then you need to make a change. Luckily for me, I have two passwords, right? I have one password that I use for the Excel sheets that like everyone in the office knows, right? That's like kind of general. And the ones that I don't want everyone to know, I have a separate password. That's it. I got two passwords. So I know every Excel sheet is one of two passwords. So even if 2 years from now there's a sheet we have in here that someone says, hey, can we make a change on that? I know what the password's going to be. It's one of two options, okay? So that's my word to the wise. But now that I've only locked the sheet, all of these changes are still possible, right? I can still make all the changes in here. Oh, I never really talked about this, but in this particular case, by the way, the hours or just blank cells to type into, right? I didn't, just whatever the hours are. And as you add those hours, you can see it's multiplying it out. Okay, so that's what I did there. So now that I've got the one sheet locked, let me put these back to zeros. Pardon me. Once I got the sheet locked, I'm going to do a save as, and I'm going to save it as an Excel template, right? So I'm going to go ahead and save it as, I'm going to put it on my desktop just so we can play with it right now. Let's see. So I'm going to look for Excel template. So how did I do that? Let me go a little slower. Sorry about that. So I'm sitting here. There's two ways to do the save as. You can go to File, Save As, right? That's one way to do it. But for anyone that's been watching these webinars for a while knows I'm a bit of a keyboard jockey. So I just happen to know that in any Microsoft Office application, F12 is Save As. So I generally just hit F12 on my keyboard since I'm generally on here typing anyway. So I hit F12, and it pops up with my Save As window, right? So I'm going to scroll up here to the desktop. And by default, it's going to save as an Excel workbook, right? The save as type. Well, if I click on this drop down, Excel template is what I'm looking for, right? Not Excel 97 to 2003 template, but my Excel template, and not macro enabled because I don't have macros, just Excel template. So I hit Excel template. I do a save. Now I'm going to close this document, and I'm going to bring over that template just so we can see how this works here. What did I call that? Of course, now I can't find it.
Should be right on the desktop, right?
It should be. Of course, I do have 3 screens, so that's probably not helpful. Let's see.
Do you want me to fill time talking about the Red Sox?
Oh, yeah, sure. That'd be exciting. Oh, because I don't think, there you go. You know what, actually this is going to be really good. So let me show that, because this will happen to you. So let me show you what happened to me. What I just did was, let me open up this thing. Okay. All right. So I had this open and I wanted to save it as a template, right? So I hit the F12 to go to save as. I went to the desktop and then I changed it to a template. Now here's where the trick came into play. When you change it to template, Microsoft thinks you want to save it into your custom Office templates folder. So it switched me from the desktop to my custom Office templates right up here. So I'm really glad that I did that. So what the lesson learned there is, choose your template first, then go to the desktop, then hit save, and then boom, it'll be on your desktop.
There we go.
Get that?
Yep.
Did that make sense?
Yeah.
All right. So I'm actually kind of glad that I did that. So that was an little learning experience there, right? So even I kind of make mistakes. So what's cool about the template, by the way, is when you open up a template, it creates a new Excel file, right? So now this is called Legal Task Pricing 1. And if I hit save, right? See up here, if I go to save, if I hit save, it prompts me to save, right? I don't save over. So if you're creating a file that's going to be a template to be used somewhere else, my recommendation is to save it in this template format, because what happens is when you open the template just by double-clicking it, it actually creates a new file, right? It's not editing the template, it creates a new file and it prompts you to save, okay? So, so that's how you can avoid save overs. And just really quickly, if you want to edit the actual template, what you do is right-click and go to Open. And when you open it, now you're actually working inside the template. Did that make sense?
Yes.
All right. Kyle, there is no chance I'm going to be able to get through the survey results.
Well, that's I would tend to agree with that. We don't have a lot of questions. There's been several questions throughout, but I've been able to answer them actually as we've gone. So why don't you get into it and maybe spend 6, 7, 8 minutes on it, and maybe just get into a couple of the features. And if you guys have any questions in the meantime, shoot them over. But if the questions are
And
quiet.
there's gonna be a quick bonus I'll give you sort of some free background on this. But all right, so here's the survey results. So one of the things I just wanted to suggest that I've done is I've used Excel to create sort of this. Hang on one sec, I just need to do something. I've created this template in such a way that it is done where all I need to do when these survey results come in is I just download them from SurveyMonkey, which is what I'm going to show you guys afterwards, the results. I copy them into this raw form, and it automatically updates this whole sheet for me so that someone doesn't always have to be doing all of these evaluations, right? So I think that that's one of the what I find Excel most useful for typically is that I'm using it to analyze data, right? So the thing is, if I'm having new data all the time, but it takes me like 3 hours to analyze it, that's really defeating part of the purpose. So in this particular case, I've created a template for these surveys that I can be able to pop out this information, and then I print this report out, we share it internally, and we see how it goes, right? So real briefly, you'll notice that I've got this light green here, which you may have recognized from the other Excel, and that light green, again, are cells that need to be updated or reviewed because they're not updated automatically, right? So manual update cells. I've also created a legend, right? So this is my legend up here, which sort of tells you what the numbers equate to in the survey, right? So in this particular survey, 4 is the highest you can get, 0 is the lowest, right? So that's what this is showing. And I also have here a big note in red, note all cells in green and any otherwise noted must be updated manually, right? Just a reminder to who goes in here and updates this, right? Because I don't do it, that what everything means in here so they can go do it. All right, I don't have a ton of time, but what I could do here is what I wanted to figure out was, so let's just say in this particular case, this is identifying a particular account manager. I just blanked out their name. I just put letters in. So this is TAM F, A, B, C, D, E, F. And this is the answer to the question, looking back and saying, for anyone of accounts that they work on, what was the average answer to the question? I believe that the technicians that service our account are sufficiently trained to service us, right? That's what sufficiently trained is abbreviated for. In this particular case, they got a 4, so everyone gave it the highest possible score. And so how did I do that? So here's the formula, and just as I did with the other thing, I'm gonna put that in Word because I think it'll be a little bit easier to see it. Okay, so the formula I'm using is equals average if, and then it's referencing the other data. Okay, so what am I trying to do? I want to say, okay, give me the average response, right? So basically, it's going to automatically take the number of responses, divide, add up the number, divided by the number of responses. I want to get the average. If the answer of the question is the question I'm looking for, and if it's the account manager that I'm looking for, right? So I want you to give me the average if, looking at this raw data based on what I've got. So here's what I've got here, right? So summary A4, which is this guy, right? That's what I'm looking at. I want you to tell me what the average is if on the raw tab in these cells, right, A3 to A258, is equal to TAM if that name, and then count the date, give me the average of the data in that cell. So let me actually do that formula so you can see it. So equals average, and there's a whole bunch of averages, but I want to choose average if. So average if, and it wants to know what is the range that I want to look for the criteria, right? So I'm going to go to my raw tab, and you can see all the names are right here. So I'm going to say all the way down. Now, I actually selected, you might have seen before, down to 250. The reason I did that was so that in the future, as we add more raw data, I won't have to re-edit the formula, right? As long as there's less than 250 responses or whatever I have in there. So I wanted to look up that. And what is the criteria? So I want to choose this particular cell. So let me just do here, equals, and that's A4, right? And then the average range is what I want to look for the average in. And this was the question sufficiently trained. So I'm going to go back to the raw data, go up to the top. I know that it's this question here, so I'm going to choose this data, go all the way down so I make sure I catch extras. And then there's my average if. So that's how I went about doing that. Given the amount of time, I'm going to skip to something else, but I was just able to get an average, right? So I know I've seen a lot of times people do these Excel cells where they added them up and then they divide by the count. You don't need to do that with the average, right? The average formula is going to do it for you, and I'm just giving it a variable, right? So that it knows to look that up based on that variable, okay? So I had that. I also did some kind of neat stuff down here, which is we had some targets that we wanted to hit, okay? And I wanted to have it automatically put in here the word sweet with an exclamation point if we hit our target. So how did I get that, right? Is this automatically done, not typed in, right? So watch. So basically what I've said is our goal is that we get out of possible 4, we want an average answer of 3.8 across all responses that say that getting support is easy to do, right? That the methods of getting support, calling us or emailing, that they find that the way that you need to get support is easy to do. That's important to us because I know when I want support, man, it's a real struggle. If on top of the thing I need support on, getting support is tough. So we strive to kind of improve that. So what you can see here is that this 3.82 exceeds the target of 3.8, and so that says sweet, right? So how did I do that? So all I did was an if statement, right? So I'm going to do equals if, open my parentheses, right? If this cell, right, is greater than that cell, right, comma, if it's true, which is the next thing it tells me, I'm going to put in quotations, sweet exclamation point, and then if it's false, I'm just going to leave it blank. So I'm just going to put an extra comma there. Ooh, pardon me, get rid of that. And I've got, well, so let me show you how I did that. So now it shows me a 0. Oh, I did less than, pardon me. Greater than sweet. And I'm going to put sweet in there, right? Now if I move this down to 3.5, it returns a 0, right? But I wanted a blank. The way to get a blank is after the comma, put in 2 quotation marks, which is the equivalent of nothing, right? And then it will give me a blank. Because anything that's inside of quotations, it's just going to put, Excel will put whatever you put between those quotations. So if I put sweet, I can put in, you know, hooray. I'll show you how I did that. It's like hooray, right? But hooray. I got to make this bigger. 3.85 says hooray. So anything inside the quotation. So if I have just 2 quotations with nothing, it's blank. 2 quotations with hooray, it's hooray, or sweet, it's sweet, right? And you'll notice that as I change these, so this one's greater than 3.75, so it got a sweet. If it went to 3.8, it would still be sweet, but if it went to 3.5, it goes to blank. Okay? So I thought that was kind of an interesting way to do if. And again, this is a sheet that I set up that someone else just updates the data, downloads the data into, and it automatically will kind of update most of the sheet with that person just putting in some of the details, you know, filling in some of the details, but not a lot. And I use some conditional formatting, which is a complicated formula that I'm not going to have time to show right now, but that also shows me if I got better than the last. So you'll notice right here, these are all green because we've been getting better every time, but at least in most categories. But watch, if this went down to a 3.0, it's not green anymore because it's less than that 3.2, right? So the green is just telling me that I got better than my previous, and we got better than our previous answer. So I think that's it, Kyle. I got 6 more minutes. I'll give them the balance back.
Sneak in the spell check on this. There's a couple words that you purposely
that's right.
mistyped.
Thank you. Yeah, one of the things Kyle and I were talking about is a lot of people don't do spell check on Excel, which can be problematic. So if you go to this view ribbon, the review ribbon here, spell check is available. So if you just click spell check, oh, that's weird. I'm in a cell. Well, that's actually what I did there. If you're in a cell and you hit the spell check, it's only going to spell check inside of that cell, right? So, because I was sort of editing it, but if you're out of it and you do spell check, it'll spell check the whole document. So I'm using an abbreviation for average, so I'm going to ignore that. And now it says parod, which I didn't mean. I meant period. So boom, I'm going to change that. I also misspelled the word previous. It's going to, just like in Word, you want to check at the beginning. Yes, I do. And the spell check is good. So Kyle did want to bring that up. So there's spell check. And then I did want to also just share with you guys, because I think it's a really cool thing. SurveyMonkey is what we use for doing surveys, and it can be really, really effective, and it's free. So I'm just going to quickly kind of show that if you go to SurveyMonkey, so it's surveymonkey.com, they have examples of surveys. So if you just like, how do I create a survey? Go to these like survey templates right under examples, and they've got examples. So you could have an employee satisfaction survey, right? If I click on that, it actually shows you what one can look like. You can copy that and get it set up. And if I go to plans and pricing, you'll notice that if you want to do short surveys, which is generally what we do, we actually did pay for it to do some additional things, but if you have a survey with less than 10 questions and less than 100 responses, it's free to sign up. So, and you can download your data and all that stuff. So I definitely, you know, it's a great way to get feedback both internally and with clients. And so, you know, I definitely encourage you to check it out.
Cool.
If getting survey results is something you're interested in.
All right, let me hit you with a couple questions here. So I think you scared somebody when you said, hey, if you forget that password, you are out of luck. This person was asking, you know, if that ever happens, can you copy and paste it? But I think the answer to that is if I lose the password, I'm not going to be able to open that sheet, right?
Yeah, you're going to, well, so so what's interesting is if you lock it correctly, in some ways you can cut and paste. So by the way, if you're looking at the screen, I just copied and pasted that. So let me show you how I did it if you want to know to be able to do it. But it's not always like that, right? So let me kind of get into it here. So if I go to review and I do protect, oh, yeah, well, that one wasn't even locked, so that's probably a bad example because I didn't save the lock. But do you see where it says all users are allow users of this worksheet to select lock and select unlock cells? You see these two check boxes? If you uncheck those so that they can't even select the cells, they won't be able to copy them. But if you leave those checked, you should be able to copy and paste them.
Okay, good. If you guys, as we're answering a couple questions, if you guys want to type in just something you learned today, something you learned during the webinar, if you can type that in there for us, we'd appreciate it. Several people are asking if the workbook, that first workbook we went through, the legal task pricing, we'll make sure that you guys can get a copy of that along with recording. Can you use VLOOKUP with an external file?
With an external Excel file?
I do believe so.
Okay. I mean, the answer is yes, but I am not a fan of linking Excel sheets. And the reason why is, I don't think I've got one in here. Sorry, I'm going to go to data. Yeah. The reason why is because the way the links in Excel work is that they're actual true links, meaning that they go directly to where the file is. So if the file that you're referencing gets moved, that link is broken. So I'm not a fan of that. My recommendation is, whenever possible, just put more sheets into Excel. I have yet to see a scenario. So I hope that that's what the question was.
That's great.
If the question was about an external SQL table, that's for another webinar.
Okay, good. Someone was asking that rate sheet when you were going through the formula, you said column 4 as opposed to column D. She was wondering why we referred to it as column 4 instead of column D.
Great question. Because the VLOOKUP doesn't care about the absolute, what I'll call the absolute position of the column. What I mean by that is this cell is D11 and it can't be anything else, right? It is absolutely D11, and no matter what you say, if you tell me to go to rates table D11, that's the cell I'm going to. But the way VLOOKUP works is I'm telling VLOOKUP what the parameters of the table and then what column within that table. So it would be 4 even if, like, hopefully that person's still looking. So what I'm going to show you is, oh, I forgot to unlock the sheet. Look at that, I'm doing like 16 things at once here. Let me unlock the sheet here. Okay, so I'm just going to move this out of the way here. Oh, whoops. Sorry, I need to unprotect the sheet. Okay, so if I move this up here, if I moved this whole table, right, if I moved it over to here, get moved. Why won't you move? Oh, there it goes. If I move the whole table over, right, it's still going to be in column 4. Does that make sense? It's the relative position of the column, not the absolute position. I
Gotcha.
might have confused it by moving it. So by saying D, that really doesn't apply here. The VLOOKUP is, I'm telling the VLOOKUP what the parameters of the table are and then what column within that table.
Very good. Excellent. Well, those are all the questions. We're 101, so I want to respect that clock. And it looks like people learned there's a lot of good things. One person said that Excel is more powerful than he is. Okay. All right. Drop down boxes and using a second tab for reference. The and join cells and also the VLOOKUP formula. The template format prevents save overs. Somebody asked, how did you get the data from SurveyMonkey into Excel? Is that an option on SurveyMonkey? Yes, it is. Just an option right in SurveyMonkey that you can export it out into a spreadsheet. I learned advanced formulas just as I wanted to. The F key tricks were helpful. I would agree with that. I think a lot of people never even, they look at that F line but never do anything with it. Very good. So Ari, well done. And we'll get a recording and also get a example of the spreadsheet over to you guys. And thank you so much for dialing in. Anything else you want to share?
No, that's it. Appreciate your guys' time, everybody. Have a great day.
Awesome. Thanks.